He got down and started into the lock, and his wife panicked.
Sorry, what was that?
This boat came down, his wife panicked.
His wife panicked?
They got halfway in and she...
Because of the height? Oh.
So now I don't know what they're going to do.
Oh boy, well I guess she's going to have to walk down and he'll drive the boat?
Parks Canada offered to take them through by themselves.
Oh yeah?
They could get off and walk and they'd walk the boat through.
Uh-huh.
She can't even do that right now.
Oh my God.
She might be there for a couple of days.
Oh jeez.
At this point, we have risen a total of 77 feet from Little Lake to the point where we are now. The canal ahead of us stretches for several kilometers before it eventually joins back to the river at Trent University. Now, the man that designed and built the Peterborough Liftlocks, R.B. Rogers, was born right here in Peterborough. Educated at Trinity College in Port Hope, he later went to McGill University in Montreal, where he earned his engineering degree. When he returned to Peterborough in the late 1800s, he was given the government-appointed position as chief engineer for the waterway, and it was his job to overcome the 77-foot drop, or 23-meter change in elevation around Peterborough. He studied this problem for quite some time, then went to Europe to study locks and canals in Belgium, England, and France, simply because they'd had a locket system there for quite a number of years prior to this. Upon his return to Peterborough, though, he put to paper the plans to build what you see here today. As they started into preparations to dig the canal and lay the footings for the giant liftlock, one of Mr. Rogers' greatest fears was that perhaps, while during construction, they might have a change of government. If this were to take place, his government-appointed position might suddenly become a serious problem, and for that reason, Rogers was very careful only to give out enough information each day just to keep his men working. Sure enough, partway through construction, they did have a change of government. However, no one knew exactly what Rogers was trying to create here, so they allowed him to continue until it was nearly finished. As it was nearing completion, though, several other engineers working with Rogers decided to gang up on him and tried to prove to the government that what he was building here was totally unnecessary and extremely costly. The only thing they did finally succeed in was getting Rogers fired. Rogers then quietly packed up all of his things, moved them out of his office back to his house, and nothing was said about the man for quite some time. However, the waterway continued to grow, and Rogers continued to try to clear his name. Finally, 9 years after this waterway opened, Rogers convinced the government to hold a hearing. At the hearing, he proved that what he built here was of good quality and would last for many years, but more importantly was necessary due to the fact that this lock can lift and lower boats in two directions 65 feet, and use only 12 inches of water in one chamber to do so, thus conserving water, which would then never in turn cause the river that flows around Peterborough to go dry during the summertime through excessive lock usages. For that simple reason alone, Rogers cleared his name but was never ever rehired by the waterway. In fact, after the hearing, the government sent him a bill for $138 to cost the hearing. Rogers lived out the rest of his days here, passed away about 1927. As we get up around the bend in the canal, you can see the Blue Bridge coming up in view in front of us. At least a lot of the kids in the area call this the Blue Bridge or the High Bridge. For during the summertime, on hot days, they love to come up here, jump off the top of it, swim back and forth and under it, much to the chagrin of many of the boaters that travel through the Narrows. But nonetheless, it's still a pretty good spot for swimming. We haven't run over a kid up here in almost 2 weeks. Today is another day.
What kind of bridge is this? Rollerbladers? Bikers?
No,
just a recreational?
It's a regular car bridge.
A regular car bridge?
Yeah, just a single lane.
Okay.
As we get past this bridge, we're going to reach our midway point today. It's spot on the canal up here, wide enough for us to turn around and go back down through the lift locks. If we were to continue up past the next swing bridge, as you'll see in a few moments, we could then travel into the area where Trent University owns both sides of the waterway. Trent possesses about 1,500 acres of property up here on each side of the canal, and then where the canal joins back to the river, you would find the campus itself, split in half by the river and joined by a very large footbridge. As you continue north of that, you travel up through 5 locks on 6 miles of river to the town of Lakefield, through Lake Ketchiwanuka and past the Lakefield Private College. That's a college where Prince Andrew went to school in his senior year. He did one of Conrad Black's sons, at least for a short time. Continuing north of that, you travel up through Young's Point, around through Clear and Stony Lake, Burley Falls, Lovesick Lake, Lower and Upper Buckhorn, continually climbing until you reach the town of Bobcaygeon. Bobcaygeon is rather important, for it was the site of the very first locks built on the waterway in 1833. And as the federal government started adding locks, dams, and canals to the system, they eventually joined it all the way from Lake Ontario to Georgian Bay, a distance of 245 miles or 386 kilometers, but over a time span that stretched for nearly 87 years. This proved to be one of the longest projects ever undertaken by the federal government and actually completed. As you leave Bobcaygeon and head out into Sturgeon Lake, you travel up through Themon Falls, through Cameron Lake, Rosedale, and eventually top out on the system at Balsam Lake, which is the highest freshwater lake in the world, that is above sea level, that you can navigate to by boat. From that point, the water flows in 2 directions. Behind us, out towards Lake Ontario, and also from Balsam Lake, it flows to the west, out through the Kirkfield Liftlocks, eventually into Lake Simcoe, and finally then all the way out into Georgian Bay. know if I got to turn it again.
Okay.
The little bay that we were about to turn in up here is known
That was
as
cool when he was hanging upside down. I thought it was cool when he was off the wall.
When Mr. Toby worked here, he earned roughly 10 cents an hour. Worked a 10-hour day, made $1 a day working on the canal. Today, that does not seem like an awful lot of money, but at that time, you could build a 2-story brick house in Peterborough for between $550 to $600 completely finished. So at $1 a day, he's actually made a pretty fair wage. He built the first house just ahead of us where you see the wooden chairs pulled out on the end of the dock. In fact, his family only sold this property just a couple of years ago.